Yes, thank you so much for an excellent talk. I may respectfully suggest to you there are two fundamental differences between now in Britain and the 1970s. The first is the unprecedented economic competition from Asia, which is a dampener upon wages and the fundamental basis of financing the welfare state. And the second is the enormous white elephant in the room that the pseudo-left political correctors don't want to talk about. That is Islamic fundamentalism due to the demographic shift in this country towards the Muslim population. Would you fair to comment upon those?
Yes. I mean, again, what I'm suggesting is that we recognize any incoming government of the right, and I think in practice we will have to work towards a broad right-based coalition. That will be essential. I do not see anything else working. What I'm trying to do is to embark on a process of policy development. And we need to recognize there will be a huge resistance. Because what I've described, the quangos, the legal system, and of course much more, the universities, the civil service, most of the commentariat, whatever, they're all signed up to what you call woke. They will resist to the last, if they have any blood in their veins, and there's not much sign of it, they will resist to the last, evil-smelling drop of whatever passes for blood in their veins. So you've got to prioritize. And it seems to me that actually the reason that the immigration has happened, the reason that we've been unable to develop industry properly, well, partly Thatcher. I mean, Thatcher's, remember, decision that we were going to go essentially with, and exacerbated under Blair, that we were going to go essentially with a financialised economy, abandon industry, and that's already, I'm a northerner, that was already, I'm afraid, factored in, and it will have to be unfactored if we're to get anywhere. But the reason all these things are so pernicious is they're embedded in this legal structure that I've talked about. Woke is not a doctrine that persuades. Woke is absurd. The idea that simply by saying, hey, I'm a woman, you will suddenly become a woman is simply madness. Isn't it? It's literally the stuff of madness. If a man says that, he should be in a mental hospital. If you're saying you're Napoleon, we look at you kindly and say, there, and reach for the nearest tranquilizer and a straitjacket. We should do exactly the same. It's simply mad. Again, left-wing economics are deranged. But the reason they're so powerful is not they command by reason. It is that there is an entire political and legal structure that supports them. And until we break that legal structure, you will get nowhere. Yep. This is what I'm trying to drive home to people. So it's all, I'm very close friends with the sort of people who are running the New Culture Forum, the Free Speech Union and all the rest of it. But you can't, indeed Douglas Murray, but you can't just tackle the culture by the culture. Persuading people will make no difference. What you've got to do is to change the law. The first job we have to do is change the law. This was the genius of Blair. This is why the country, which in terms of its history should have been most resistant to this kind of rubbish, was completely taken over and defeated, because the law embodies this stuff. The law, as I gave you, our most influential single lawyer, Bingham, said about human rights. They're counter-majoritarian. The idea of two-tier justice isn't just the odd, silly, arrogant policeman, or more typically policewoman, especially one wearing a hijab. It is actually written into the law. It's actually, we have two-tier law. And until we un-two-tier, you're all very genteel, but I'll use the language I've been using to reform. Until we unfuck what Blair did, we will get nowhere. In other words, there's got to be priority. In the same way Thatcher prioritized. You can't do everything at once. And we can't change the world outside.
How can we do it? How?
Well, I've just... wouldn't it be a good idea first to say, we admit where we got it wrong, And B, to put it in, perhaps we might have a leader which would say the odd thing that I'm indicating, Perhaps a leader that said, well, actually, we were responsible for non-crime hate incidents. That was probably a mistake. That rather than have, again, you were talking about immigration, rather than having Boris Johnson lie, no, never. For the first time. I mean, how could anything, in saving of an untruth, sully those pure lips, recently kissed by Carrie? What have we done? We've completely failed to take the initiative. And again, what I'm doing, I'm working any of you have been looking at the stuff that I've done online, I've been working very closely with the Prosperity Institute, who are otherwise known as Legatum. They're one of the great city hedge funds, Dubai-based hedge fund. They've vast amounts of money. And what we've done, we've set up a unit to deal with the drafting of the repeal legislation. We have a brilliant young lawyer who, again, interestingly, is a very anglicised Sikh, young chap called Amarjit Yoha. And they are working on the detailed drafting of legislation, drawing on the best people in Oxbridge and elsewhere to come up with it. And this will be a degree of preparation for government that is the equivalent of the difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2. If you remember the great difference of Trump 2, Trump 1 was a disaster, just sort of Trump unfiltered, which is a disaster. And Trump 2 was that extraordinary moment in which, think back to January, you see him being sworn in the rotunda of the Capitol. A few moments later, he's sitting at the Resolute desk, given, of course, by Victoria to the American president, at that desk there with that mysterious man, Stephen Miller, the Deputy Chief of Staff behind him, who's been working flat out for the last 4 years drafting executive orders. And there's that vast pile of executive orders. And what Trump is ready to go from minute one. We don't have executive orders, but we need a similar legislative program. And again, there's got to be that willingness to do what Trump did, which is to seize the moment. The British Prime Minister, as Thatcher showed very clearly, as Churchill at his best showed, as Lloyd George, as all the great Prime Ministers, you have Blair. You have quasi-monarchical power if you've got the confidence, if you can command Parliament. You can do it. We've got to have a leader like that, otherwise we're lost. There's nobody, well, at the moment, the front runner, and again, I always say that I am a whore. I advise anybody, and I'm a very bad whore because I don't even charge. I don't think I've charged you. But I am advising Farage. He's the front runner at the moment. I do it without, I remain a member of the Conservative Party. I do it without particular hope. You cannot choose your instrument in politics. The electorate does. I've already, if you look at, I did a really interesting discussion with Gawain Towler of Reform on the eve of the Reform conference, in which I put all my reservations about Nigel. I've known him for about 30 years because my colleague at LSE, Alan Sked, was the first founder of UKIP, and of course there's this saga of ruptured relations. He may be. I don't think he's obvious prime ministerial material. I think we have a chance in somebody like Robert Jenrick, who is by far the most, people are not shaking their heads. There will be different views. But at the moment, we'll see the party conference. We are not in a position as we were in '75, where there was that moment of change. You see, Kemi has shown no sign of grasping these things, it seems to me. And also there's another great problem. There's been no break. The very fact that Ted Heath threw his sulk, that gigantic sulk, meant there was Thatcher didn't need to do anything. Ted going around, making a nuisance of himself. Everybody knew there'd been a break. Sorry, I'm going on too much. Right, somebody else? Yeah. Take a microphone over there.
Thank you very much. It seems that everything moves much quicker now than in the 1970s, and I do agree with you. I think that the Starmer government reflects the Heath government in many ways. I suspect things will have to get worse before the sort of leader charges in and changes things for the Tories or reform Tories if it's a combined mix. Would you agree that we probably have certainly the remainder of this government, possibly even a bit longer, before Britain will see sense and finally turn its back on what's been going on?
Quickly.
Let's get done very quickly.
Short answer is no. I think that remember, there is no doubt that the Starmer government will fail. It is clearly failing now. There's a very simple reason. It is the government of the blob, by the blob, for the blob. And once what it's shown is that even a government of the blob with this gigantic majority cannot run the country. It is clear that the system Blair created does not work because of judicial review, of constant intervention by judges, of the incompetence of quangos, of the gigantic cost of the thing, the fact that it's breaking the economy. I mean, what we've done is very typical. Rome did exactly the same thing. You create a governmental machine that's too big for the economy to support. That's what we have at the moment. And at the same time, there is no agreement on the necessary cuts. Rome, it was very simple. It was when Caracalla doubles the wages of the Roman army in 260. Rome never recovers from that point. We must hope that, I mean, it's essentially Gordon Brown's decision that everybody had to receive welfare. His idea was that you could only keep the welfare state going, give everybody, this is when you start giving people on hundreds of thousands a year child benefit. It's when you give pensioners like me winter fuel allowances and free television licenses. This entire insanity, exacerbated by COVID, exacerbated, I'm afraid, by people like Ian Duncan Smith. Can you imagine a Conservative creating something called universal credit? It's deranged.
I don't mean it's going to take 10 years, but you might have two governments within a...
Well, no, it could be. But what we remember, we are seeing the 70s accelerating. Yeah. I think that we're already on the point of a bond crash. And at the same time, it'll be something very much like, we've seen again the beginnings of a winter of discontent within the public sector. It's 76 and 77 melding, and 79 melding into each other. But the problem is we are not ready. No. We are not ready. And it seems to me this chance is being thrown away.
Yes.
Yep. And then we'll go back over there.
When Thatcher ceased to be Prime Minister, she was asked what her greatest achievement was, and I'm sure she said many things, but one prominent thing was that she changed the mind of the opposition. You've mentioned it, Blair carried on her fiscal policies. And then when Cameron came in, he said that he was the heir to Blair. I just wonder if you had any inkling or knowledge even, or experience of why he didn't notice what Blair had done in terms of siphoning power away from Parliament into those quangos, and why, if he did notice it, why he didn't do anything about it.
I think the answer is that Cameron believed in it. I'm sorry, I think this is what...
the one that told the truth.
Pardon?
He was the heir to Blair.
I think Cameron was the heir to Blair. I think that this was quite deliberate. I mean, again, look at Theresa May. Can you imagine Is this actually, yes. Can you imagine a Conservative leader who calls their own party the nasty party and stands on the steps of Downing Street saying that she regrets the bitter wrongs of the country? I mean, Conservative Prime Minister to talk about bitter injustices. She is the one who introduces DEI into the civil service. It's completely deranged. But the problem is the zeitgeist. It's the feeling of the times, and people go with it. But I think the fundamental question is that the belief that so long as there was something like free market economics, that was all right. And again, there's been some very interesting stuff being done there's amazing stuff online if you just look. And there's been some very interesting stuff quoting Roger Scruton. And Scruton, again, it is, I think, the problem that the dominant figures who've tried to define conservatism, like Michael Oakeshott and Roger Scruton, have been philosophers. And they've talked about feelings, belongings, all of this, dare one say, terribly airy-fairy stuff. Conservatism is a political thing. We forgot the important, again, the Constitution, it sounds dull and dry. It's not. The Constitution is the kind of quintessence of our history. It's the point at which that historical experience of a people shapes their present and determines their future. We've completely lost sight of that. In other words, there's been a terrible death of proper conservative thought. You know, we all praise figures like Edmund Burke and whatever. Edmund Burke is a genuine radical. He says what I say about the French Revolution. If you read what he says about the French Revolution, it's identical to what Blair did. You root everything up. You declare it's a new country. You try to alter the circumscriptions of government. You alter the law. You alter language. You introduce universal human rights. And it's destructive, deliberately destructive. And we went along with it because we were foolish. But we're a party that's shallow. Its intellectual roots are shallow. Over to the, I think the far, yeah. Gentleman in the pink shirt.
One more question. Do you mind taking
No,
questions
I'm
after
delighted.
we've
Yeah.
Isn't the real problem which we have to address in this room, our party is infected with the cancer of liberalism.
Yeah.
And until we can purge the party of that cancer, we will go nowhere. And if it is an impossible task to do that, should we not begin to coalesce around reform and forge together a genuine conservative movement?
Can I have the microphone? Sorry. I hope that turns out not to be the case. As you know, I have a very soft spot for reform. We've talked about this a lot. But I equally value the history and the traditions of the Conservative Party. And I think they are essentially noble, and they've mattered, and I don't like destroying things. I think destroying things is a really bad idea. That's what the left does. The left likes smashing things up, and it's very bad at creating. What I want to do is a restoration. I want to bring back and I want to restore. But until, this is where I agree with you, until we make plain to those who are leading the party that what they're doing is wholly inadequate, we are at risk, I'm afraid, of what you suggest not being a course of action that we choose, but being the only available course of action. It's very simple. And we've very little time. Because, again, the enormous difference from the 70s, Thatcher had time. Yeah. It was the left that was divided. You had the rise of the Social Democrat Party, you had the split of Labour. Admittedly, I think Labour is at the point of splitting again, and there's the added excitement of the Islamic fringe as well. And indeed, when I'm being really naughty, I refer to the resulting party, you know, the your party, our party, whatever else it is. I refer to it as the fruit, nut and chalk party, which gives you a very clear idea of its composition. But unfortunately, the main split is us. I mean, if you actually look at the latest opinion polls, if we were able, which we should be able on the basis of policy, to reunite on the right, we're at a clear 45%, which is a sweeping majority in a first past the post system. But again, there's got to be I think, for me, and this is why I've spent the time talking entirely in policy terms and entirely policy analysis, the only way there will be union on the right if there's a union that begins in policy. You can't do it by a negotiation between precious personalities. Of course you can't, but on the basis of policy, you might be able to do so.